First up is mechanical filtration, and mechanical filtration is the process of removing large organics from the water. The easiest way to think about it is just a sponge. Water passes over the sponge and large pieces of fish food or fish waste or algae are filtered out. Then you just remove this, rinse it, and you've mechanically filtered the water. The second type of filtration is what we in the hobby colloquially refer to as filter floss. It's really just a polyester filler they use in like teddy bears. What's really handy about this is you can just put it in the first stage of your mechanical filter, just where you put a sponge, and then just pull it out, throw it away every few days, and replace it. The third type of mechanical filtration are filter socks. These come in various sizes, both in diameter and in length, and they also come in different micron sizes, which means how porous they are. You just want to make sure you pick up a standard one that will fit your filter sock holder and then replace them every few days. I usually wash these by just throwing them in my washing machine with nothing else and some bleach and then drying them, and then you're good to go. The fourth and final type of mechanical filtration is going to take a little bit more discussion because it's not fully understood by beginners. We're talking about protein skimmers. Protein skimmers come in all sorts of sizes. This is an example of a nano skimmer that fits in a rear filtration chamber. And here's an example of a full-size skimmer that you would put in your sump. In essence, a protein skimmer uses bubbles to filter out organic material. So the basics of how a protein skimmer works is you have a pump that pushes up a lot of bubbles. The organic matter, which is hydrophobic, is attracted to those bubbles, will go on the top of the bubbles. Then what happens is the bubbles are pushed up to the very, very top, over the top, and into a collection container that you can then dispose of. For a lot of hobbyists, protein skimmers are the primary backbone of their mechanical filtration. Protein skimmers need to be broken in. So if you own your first protein skimmer and you set it up and you follow the directions and it just overflows, don't be distressed, because every single person has to go through that, because it takes a little while, a week, sometimes up to a couple weeks, for a protein skimmer to properly break in and for those bubbles to come down. Then every kind of protein skimmer is going to have some sort of adjustment knob to control the water height and whether or not you get a wet skimmate or a dry skimmate. And basically what that means is if you have a wet skimmate, you're allowing the water level to go higher so that you're filtering out not only the organic matter, but quite a bit of water. So typically speaking, in your collection cup, that skimmate will be lighter in color. But if you do a dry skimmate, you're basically lowering the water level so that only a little bit of bubbles come up the top, thus pushing over primarily organic matter and not as much water, and then your skimmate in the collection cup will be quite dark. Just be patient with the setup process, especially if it's your first time, and feel free to reach out to me or Marine Depot if you have any questions. We're all here to help. When I first started out in this hobby, biological filtration was by far the most confusing to me because there were so many different types of products that didn't seem similar. Ceramic media, biological media, plastic media, pellet media. I didn't even understand how it worked. So let's break that down first. Biological filtration is when beneficial bacteria, both aerobic and anaerobic bacteria, colonize parts of your tank, the sand bed, the live rock, or ceramic or plastic media, helping to take ammonia and converting it into nitrogen gas. Anytime you have decaying matter, whether that comes from fish waste, whether that comes from fish food, algae, that will break down into ammonia, which is super toxic for your fish. The ammonia turns into nitrite, nitrite turns into nitrate, nitrate turns into nitrogen gas. And all of that is the function of the biological filter. So when we're talking about biological filtration media, we're talking about ways to enhance and increase the power of your biological filter. The first type of biological media is ceramic media. And basically what you're doing is you are buying ceramic pieces, whether they're ceramic balls, whether they're ceramic bricks, plates, you name it, and you are providing a home for beneficial bacteria to colonize. If you have live rock in your tank, which I'd say most saltwater aquarium hobbyists do, that live rock will be colonized. But if you add a lot of livestock, sometimes that beneficial bacteria can't handle the bioload. That's why you add these varying products to provide those beneficial bacteria with more homes in which to colonize. They come in different sizes and shapes because everybody's tank has different needs. For example, if you have a hang on the back filter or a rear filtration chamber, the thing that might make the most sense to you is to put a bunch of these marine pure bioballs into some sort of media bag and place it in your overflow. And you don't need to just go out and purchase extra ceramic media because your live rock and live sand may be able to handle your bioload. But if you notice your nitrates start to spike, then it might be time to consider something like ceramic media. The second type of biological filtration media are called biopellets. This is a product from Two Little Fishies, and it's marketed as a nitrate reducer and a phosphate reducer. But really, primarily, it's nitrate reduction and a little bit of phosphate reduction as the nitrates fall. The easiest way to think about biopellets is steroids for your beneficial bacteria. The most effective way to use biopellets is to place them in a media reactor so that they can lightly tumble. What will happen is those beneficial bacteria will colonize inside of that reactor and slowly consume this as food. What kind of food is this? It's just a carbon source, just like you can use sugar dosing or vodka dosing, and you're providing food for those beneficial bacteria. You will notice that these will start to shrink over time as the beneficial bacteria consume them. One word of caution though is if this were to become completely depleted, all of those beneficial bacteria would starve and die, and you might see a sudden spike in your nitrates. So if you do start using biopellets, you just want to monitor your nitrate levels, and then you're going to need to top off your reactor from time to time as these are consumed. The third type of biological filtration media is called carbon dosing. It's very, very similar to the biopellet method, except instead of containing all of that carbon in a reactor, you are dosing your entire tank, thus encouraging that beneficial bacteria to colonize in the live sand, the live rock, and the ceramic media you already have. There's a lot of different methods for adding carbon to your tanks, such as vodka and sugar, but I prefer using these products from Brightwell Aquatics. When I'm starting out a new tank, I always start out by adding microbacter, which is nitrifying bacteria. Then, if I'm noticing my nitrates increasing, I will start dosing a biofuel. And basically, this is a reef-safe carbon source, and as long as you dose it on a consistent level, you will provide more food for your biological media to consume, thus increasing your overall biological filtration. And the fourth and final type of biological filtration media is something you saw a lot over a decade ago, and you still see it, especially in the freshwater hobby and canister filters, are plastic bioballs. Basically, these do the same thing as the ceramic media, providing a porous home for beneficial bacteria. The biggest downside to plastic bioballs is they're not very porous, so you're not going to be able to have as much beneficial bacteria colonize these as ceramic media. The third and final type of filtration is chemical filtration. Chemical filtration is the process of using chemicals to remove certain undesirable things from the water, such as phosphate, nitrate, heavy metals, smells, and colors. The most common type of chemical filtration is some sort of activated carbon. Activated carbon can be placed in some sort of media bag or in a reactor. And activated carbon helps remove unwanted smells, colors, and heavy metals from the water column. Then you have GFO, which is granular ferric oxide. This can also be used in a reactor or in a media bag. GFO is really good at removing phosphates from the water. Another kind of filtration media is something called purigen, which is a nitrate remover. Now, it doesn't actually remove nitrates exactly, but it does remove proteins and organics, which will lead to nitrates. A couple quick thoughts. The first one has to do with activated carbon. There's different types out there, some of which is more effective than the others. This is just your standard Aquamax carbon. Aquamax also sells the high capacity ROX 0.8 carbon, which has been shown to be able to remove more colors, more heavy metals, and more smells from your water column. If you tumble carbon in a media reactor, it can actually be ground down into a fine dust. So if you do put it in a media reactor, you want to make sure you cut out some sponges to put on the top and the bottom and pack it in very tight so there's no tumbling. You can also just put it in some sort of media bag. Just make sure you put the media bag in a high flow area. GFO is a little bit different than carbon because it's much more hard and won't break down as easily. So if you do put it in a reactor, you can gently tumble it. That way the water column passes through and interacts with this media more. There are a ton more different types of chemical filtration media, so just click the link below and you can browse everything Marine Depot has to offer. You can also click on blog below for a link to My First Fish Tank, and there will be links to all of these products as well as explanations and how to use them. Reactors and media bags. Let's get the most simple out of the way first, which is media bags. Media bags come in different shapes and sizes with a different level of porosity. For example, this one right here is highly porous. This would be good for a larger type media like the two little fishies biopellets, but something that has a much more finer mesh is going to be better for GFO or activated carbon. Using media bags works, but it's not going to be nearly as effective as a media reactor. And that's just because media only works when water passes through it. So if you don't get much water movement through your media bags because it's placed in a bad area, then you're not going to get the reaction you need to remove the unwanted substances. That's where media reactors step in. Without a doubt. No, seriously, without any doubt, the most confusing topic for me when I was a beginner were media reactors. And that's because I didn't understand what made a reactor, because there are so many different types of reactors. You have simple, small reactors that are meant for carbon, GFO, or biopellets. One like this Aquamax media reactor, same thing, really good for carbon, GFO, biopellets. But then you have things like kalkwasser reactors, which work completely differently. And then you have things like calcium reactors, which are different again. So since there's so many different types of reactors out there, what makes a reactor a reactor? A reactor is basically any sort of canister where water passes through some sort of media. That's it. Now, different kinds of media reactors hold different kinds of media and work slightly differently. But the goal of a media reactor is to give as much contact time between the media and the water column. Media bags are passive. You just have to place the bags in an area that you know the water will pass through. But media reactors are active because you attach a pump to the reactor, forcing the water through the reactor, thus interacting with the media way more. So let's talk about the three primary kinds of media reactors and what makes them unique. The first type of media reactor, and I think the most simple type of media reactor to talk about, is just a carbon GFO reactor like this Aquamax GFO and carbon reactor. It's really quite simple. All you do is you put your media in the canister, you attach the pump to it, water goes in through here, comes down, and it goes up through the media, forcing your water to interact with the media before it comes out clean. Obviously, the more flow you have through here, the more the water column will come into contact, and thus the more efficacious your media reactor will be. A couple really important things to talk about though. Number one, you first need to make sure you rinse your media, especially your GFO and your carbon, because the first time water runs through it, you will see a bunch of brown or black dust come off, and you don't want that in your tank. There are a couple really easy ways to rinse it. You can just rinse it with some RODI water, or you can get out a 5-gallon bucket, place one end with the pump into the clean RODI water and the other side into an empty bucket and give it a 5-gallon flush. The second type of reactor is called a kalkwasser reactor. And kalkwasser is just lime water in German. And it's one of the only ways out there besides a calcium reactor where you can dose proportionate amounts of calcium and alkalinity to your tank. Another positive side effect of kalkwasser is it has a really high pH. So as long as you add it in small amounts over the course of the day, it has the potential to raise the pH. There are many different types of kalkwasser reactors out there, and they all utilize slightly different methods for mixing your kalkwasser. I don't necessarily recommend kalkwasser reactors for beginners because you can accomplish a lot of this by either adding kalkwasser into your auto top-off reservoir or by just mixing a little batch of kalkwasser with some RODI water and setting up a little drip line. But if you're going to go with one, the Two Little Fishies kalkwasser reactor is probably the most simple because it doesn't have any sort of external pumps. It only relies on your automatic top-off system to function. Basically what happens is you plumb one end of your automatic top-off plumbing into the reactor, and then there's this little mechanism down on the bottom that will lightly stir it up as your auto top-off system turns on. It will push the water up and out into your tank. One thing you want to be careful of if you do end up going with some sort of kalkwasser reactor is there's this slurry at the bottom that will be this white color. That is really high in pH and you don't want to dose that into your tank. A couple things to note about kalkwasser and kalkwasser reactors. Kalkwasser will gunk up your pumps a lot faster, so you might need to do vinegar soaks to remove some of that precipitate. And you just want to test regularly because if you dose too much kalkwasser all at once, it can spike your pH really quickly, which is not great for your corals or livestock. And the final type of reactor we're going to talk about is a calcium reactor like this T-Nano from Aquamax. A calcium reactor works by adding crushed coral in as the media, then adding carbon dioxide, which lowers the pH to around 6.5, meaning it's slightly acidic. Thus, the coral will break down into calcium and alkalinity, which can then be dosed back into your tank. Calcium reactors can be daunting for a beginner because there's so many different tubes and canisters. It can be overwhelming. You need some sort of canister that's going to hold the media, which is crushed coral. Then you need a CO2 tank and a regulator to add CO2 into that media reactor space, thus lowering the pH and creating a slightly acidic environment. Then you need some sort of pump to push water through the reactor. And lastly, you need some sort of drip valve to be able to control the rate of flow when you're adding the calcium and alkalinity back to your tank. Now, I know, it sounds super complicated to set up, and for a beginner, it is a little bit complicated, and it has a higher upfront cost, but once it's up and running and you have it tuned in, it will actually save you money in the long run, and you won't have to be adding calcium and alkalinity to your tank every day. Now let's move on into algae scrubbers. I would say most algae scrubbers contain some sort of plastic sheet with lights on both sides and a pump to push water through. Basically how an algae scrubber works is you're providing a place for algae to grow. Hopefully that algae in your scrubber will grow faster and consume more of the phosphates in your tank than the algae in your display tank, thus reducing the nuisance algae you have to see. Then all you have to do is every so often you open up your algae scrubber, you scrape out the algae that's in there, and you close it back up so that more algae can grow. And the final topic of conversation today are UV sterilizers. How does UV sterilizer work? It doesn't kill anything, but basically what it does is it uses light in the UV spectrum, and it has the water column pass through the UV sterilizer, thus coming into contact with the UV light. Now, the UV light doesn't kill pathogens in the water, but it damages their DNA so they can't reproduce. So let's say your fish become infected with something like Brooklanella, ick, or marine velvet. A UV sterilizer is going to do nothing to cure those fish, but it may help shorten the life cycle because as those diseases drop off, they will get circulated through the UV sterilizer, thus potentially disabling those pathogens so they can't reproduce. A UV sterilizer is a really good preventative measure. It can definitely help remove things like cyanobacteria, algae from your tank, and it can help keep your water column much cleaner with way less pathogens. But don't think of it as a cure-all. Think of it rather as a tool to help reduce those pathogens, thus giving your livestock a greater chance for success and for health. A lot of people ask, hey, can I use a UV sterilizer in my display tank and just forego a quarantine tank? And the answer is definitely not. You still need to have a quarantine tank. A UV sterilizer will just help. I hope that was helpful. Links to my blog and to all the Marine Depot products are below. Please like, subscribe. We'll see you next week.